Victoria's high country may be beautiful, but it can be brutal too.
There are serious concerns tonight for a man and woman in their 70s who failed to return home after a touring trip along the Dargo River.
It has a curious history of people going missing, including Russell Hill and Carol Clay.
They set off on a trip to the Unanswered Valley where they set up camp, fatefully just metres from Greg Lynn, a family man who loved the outdoors.
Hey, who's scared? Me.
It was March 2020 as the world was on the cusp of the pandemic and the airline pilot from Caroline Springs had gone bush to hunt deer.
It's the kind of place where you could get away with murder.
My hand was not on the trigger.
Greg Lynn tried to do just that.
Packed up, hitched the trailer, packed my camp up, put them in the trailer. It was wrong of me to hide those bodies like that. I should have just come straight to the police.
One of the attractions of Wonnangatta is how difficult it is to get to.
This is very rugged terrain. That's an understatement. It's clear that anyone driving along this road would have to know what they're doing. It's a very remote area. There is no reception and very few people passing through.
It's why Russell liked coming here. An experienced bushman, he was happy to go off-grid for days, even weeks at a time. The only contact he needed with the outside world came through his high-frequency radio.
He was quite the outdoors man, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yep. But he liked being out in nature and loved it.
Pretty confident he was going to be okay out there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
At first, there was nothing different about this trip. On the night he arrived, Russell radioed home, a sign he was safe. But that would be the last time his wife, Robin, would hear his voice.
When did you start to get worried?
When Mum rang,
Yeah.
and she said she was worried because she hadn't heard from him. She knew deep down that something was wrong. So then she did contact the police.
What his wife, Robin, and daughters didn't know was he had a companion on the trip, Carol Clay.
It was a shock when the police mentioned something about, do we know a Carol? That was the first we knew about it.
And this is a difficult question, but do you know anything about their relationship?
No, we didn't know anything about him and Carol being together.
Russell Hill was an experienced bushman, Carol Clay a stalwart of the CWA. But behind closed doors, they were childhood sweethearts hiding a secret love affair.
They had to keep it secret, and in some ways I feel that that's why they went to such a remote place.
While Russell's family was kept in the dark, Carol's younger sister, Jill, knew the pair was together.
Did you know that Carol was going on this trip?
Yes, I knew. I knew that she was going camping, not just on that occasion, but on other occasions. And I knew that she was having the relationship and that they were doing these trips, yeah.
It is a difficult topic to discuss, isn't it?
Oh, extremely difficult, yes. And I feel very sorry for Robin because she found out two things at the same time. You know, one, that Russell was missing, and two, he was camping with someone else. Yeah, very, very difficult.
In a way, when we did first find out he wasn't on his own, it was a little bit comforting. You know, having someone go missing and potentially burnt on their own, like how bad would that be?
How's your mum? How's she been through all this?
It's been really hard on Mum.
Yeah, the hardest on her.
Yeah, because not only losing her husband, but also all the talk about Carol. And so she's got both. She's lost her husband and she's grieving the loss of her relationship. And so it's been very hard for her to get through both.
It's lonely because you've got no one to talk to.
And you miss him?
I do, because I keep, you can't ask him because he's not here. Like, I've got nothing against Carol.
When police reached the campsite, they were immediately suspicious. Russell's tent, filled with camping gear, was burnt to ashes. But his ute was barely touched. It was locked with the contents of the pair's wallets strewn across the floor.
Doesn't make sense, does it?
Doesn't make sense at all, and particularly for someone like Russell, who I say is a very experienced, very fastidious camper. So there's a lot of elements about that fire that make it look like the fire was set to conceal a crime.
Piecing this together has been no easy feat for leading investigators Detective Inspector Andrew Stamper
Someone was trying to cover their tracks.
and Detective Acting Sergeant Brett Florence.
The other camper would have seen Russell and Carol.
They've spent countless hours sifting through every bit of evidence in this puzzling investigation.
There's 1,000,001 places you could hide a body out there.
Yeah.
It's like a needle in a haystack.
It's a needle in a hayfield.
But the crime scene had left few other clues about what had happened to the missing campers. Do you think there's any chance Carol is still alive?
There is this tiny little glimmer that both Carol and Russell could still be alive, but my heart tells me they're not.
For 20 long months, there was seemingly little progress in the investigation.
Every now and then it does just pop in your mind as oh, that's right, that's not a dream, that was real. We're really in this situation and it just never ends.
Yeah, actually, it's like a living nightmare. And without knowing what's happened or finding a body, I feel like there's always that little glimmer of hope that he might come back. So that's really hard because deep down I know he won't.
Until detectives made a major breakthrough.
And this is the first time you're revealing this to the public?
Absolutely, yes. This information that we release today will be, I think, a big step towards solving this mystery.
This four-wheel drive became the strongest lead police had in the hunt for clues about what happened to Russell Hill and Carol Clay.
We're getting close.
We are. The key to it all is this car. That's our...
We believe it's a mid-90s Nissan Patrol. This one is dark blue.
Central to this case are these roadside cameras situated on one of 3 roads out of Wonnangatta.
So these are the cameras here that you're particularly interested in?
So there's 2 here.
By analysing footage captured here, police have managed to account for every vehicle that left the valley that weekend, except for this one.
If we identify that vehicle and the driver of that vehicle, we could solve this mystery.
Really, you're that confident?
Absolutely, yeah. The person that carried out this is probably just an ordinary member of the community who's operating in a normal job, but carrying this significant load on their mind.
What detectives didn't reveal was they already had a suspect and were waiting to pounce.
Until November 2021, when a 60-minute story became part of their strategy to spook the killer. Greg Lynn and his wife Melanie were watching, unaware police had bugged their home. As the show aired, Melanie laughed. "I'll admit it does look like your car and trailer. It really does." He responds, "That's not funny, sweet pea." Almost a week later, he was captured removing the awning from his four-wheel drive, which had already been repainted. Within days, police tracked him heading back to the high country. So, under the cover of darkness, they pounced on the 57-year-old at a secluded campsite.
Heavily armed police have made a dramatic arrest.
That 55-year-old man who is now in police custody is a Jetstar pilot.
A lot of grief and pain during that time, but now all of a sudden there's a glimmer that we might get some answers.
When police first visited Lynn, he told officers he hadn't seen the couple. But after his arrest, he changed his story.
I could hear this buzzing sound. I stepped on a bee's hive or a wasp nest or something.
Admitting they'd met and claiming tensions had flared over a drone.
And I looked up and there was a bloody drone right above my head. And that was bizarre. I only had gaze of it for a couple of seconds and then whoosh, and it went gone.
Yep.
Lynn said Hill had filmed him hunting in an area he shouldn't have been, threatening to go to police.
He didn't like deer hunters, and he had some video footage of me now hunting, close to the camp.
In a childish response, Lynn blared music from his car to annoy the couple. He claimed the next thing he saw was Hill walking towards him with a shotgun taken from his car.
Came around here and I confronted him, give it back. What are you doing? And he said he's going to take that to the police with him. I jumped up, I grabbed the shotgun barrel with my right arm, pivoted around, so I was facing him facing away from the bonnet of the car. I had the left hand on the stock, right hand on the barrel, and we wrestled. The shotgun was pointed over this way, and it was discharged. My hand was not on the trigger. And then we wrestled. I told him to let it go. He would, and kept on wrestling, then back. It went through the left hand rear view and killed Miss Clay dead.
What followed, he claimed, was a struggle over a knife that ended with Russell Hill being fatally stabbed by accident.
Matthew with a knife.
Yep.
I grabbed him.
Yep.
Pulled him in, and he was still coming at me.
Yep.
And he came down on top of me on the back, and went in his chest. I went over. Miss Clay was clearly dead. I came back. I checked for a pulse on Mr. Hill. He was clearly dead.
Lynn's version of events was later described as a fantasy by prosecutors.
And from here, I panicked. I thought I was going to get blamed for this, as I am.
What was never in dispute was the extraordinary lengths he took to cover his tracks, to burn evidence at the campsite and dispose of the couple's bodies. A cold and calculated act of self-preservation.
And I tried to remove as much evidence as I could. It was very messy. I put the tables and things inside the tent.
Yep.
And packed everything up, and as I left it, the fire.
But as he fled the scene, he ran into trouble.
But it very quickly unravelled at the very first turn. I came to the crossing, and it was closed.
Track closure forced him to change his escape route, leading him to dumping the bodies and driving along a road where he was then snapped by a number plate recognition camera.
I haven't behaved well. I've made some poor decisions.
Lynn would return to the bodies twice before his arrest, burning them on his second trip before scattering the remains. The gruesome act overwhelmed him.
Horrific thing to have to deal with. I was sick when I was there several times.
When he was taken here to Sale Police Station, he initially refused to cooperate.
His standoff with detectives continued for days until, on a hand-drawn map, he showed officers where to find the bodies. It was enough, according to police, to charge him with 2 counts of murder.
You're going to be charged with the murders of Russell Hill and Carol Clay. You do not have to say or do anything unless you wish to do so, but whatever you say or do may be recording and giving evidence. Do you understand this?
I understand.
It took more than 2 years for Greg Lynn to finally stand trial after his arrest.
The man accused of the brutal bush slaying of missing campers Russell Hill and Carol Clay has appeared in court for the first time.
All eyes were on the witness box as Greg Lynn chose to be one of the very few accused killers to be questioned at his own murder trial. You understand that not coming forward, causing immeasurable pain to their family and loved ones, that people will regard your acts as despicable. It was despicable. All I can say to the families is that I'm very sorry for their suffering.
This is Melbourne's 9 News.
But there was another twist still to come.
Good evening. After 6 days of deliberation, a jury has delivered a bombshell split verdict in the missing campers trial. They found Greg Lynn guilty of murdering Carol Clay, but acquitted the Jetstar pilot of killing her lover, Russell Hill.
Prosecutors called it a series of unfortunate events, and the jury somewhat agreed. Satisfied beyond reasonable doubt, Lynn killed Carol in cold blood, but unsure of what exactly happened to Russell. Russell's daughter Colleen was stoic outside court but fought back tears inside, with police releasing this statement on behalf of the families. Russell Hill and Carol Clay's families are both relieved and devastated at the verdicts. There was not enough evidence to be sure of how Russell died. The accused was the only person who saw and experienced what happened. He was also the only person who emerged alive.
An extraordinary twist in the tale of a very surprising case.
I think it makes you feel numb. His death was for nothing because no one's going to be punished for it.
I'm angry with the result. The more I think about it, the more angry I get to the fact that it didn't have to be this way.
Do you feel, Debbie, as though justice has been served for your father?
No, I don't. My dad was not a violent person in any way. He wouldn't have provoked anything. So I'm not sure what happened exactly, but he was definitely murdered.
Greg Lynn's conviction isn't the end of the story. Disturbing secrets from his past have since come to light. Information never heard by the jury about the torment he inflicted on his first wife.
He was a nutcase.
Lisa was the cheerful air hostess who married Greg, the charismatic pilot. The Lynns had 2 children and lived what appeared to be a picture-perfect life. But it was a facade. Behind closed doors, their marriage was failing. Greg Lynn was a bully, an abuser, and a cheat.
What caused their relationship to deteriorate? What caused the split?
He was seeing another flight attendant. But my understanding, he'd been unfaithful to her on more than one occasion previously, so he was a bit of a serial offender, was my understanding.
Bronwyn Will was Lisa Lynn's closest neighbour and her rock. Bronwyn lived just across the road from the Lynn's house in the serenity of Mount Macedon in country Victoria. For the most part, Lisa would only hint at the abuse she suffered at the hands of her domineering husband.
Was Lisa ever physically abused by Greg?
She did describe a time where I think Greg slammed a door on her and it hit her in the head and it knocked her unconscious. And then there was another time where I think Lisa had had too much to drink or something, and Greg pushed her outside and, hosed her down or locked her outside, overnight.
I bound her hands and feet with masking tape and carried her outside into the backyard. I put her near the back steps and hosed her down with water from the garden hose. I then sat out there with her and she got extremely cold. Now, I agree this action was quite unusual, but my intentions were for her to never drink to excess like that again.
When Greg left to set up a new life with his lover, the abuse continued unabated. He bombarded Lisa with threats and broke into the family home to take belongings, including the car, leaving Lisa isolated and desperate.
Who does that to their wife? Who makes their wife feel unsafe? No. He wasn't a good husband.
Well, it's worse than that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah. I said to her, look, you really should think about updating your will or getting a new will. And she said, no, I can't do that. I can't do that because that will mean Greg's going to kill me. Wow. I just thought, that's a weird thing to say.
In October 1999, Lisa was found dead in mysterious circumstances at the age of 34. She was lying in the fetal position in the driveway, her 2 sons still asleep inside. A coroner found her death to be the result of a combination of alcohol and prescription drugs.
I've never accepted that Lisa intended to take her life. Never accept that. She adored those kids. Absolutely adored those kids.
What was said in open court during the pre-trial arguments were some statements from Lisa's mum. She basically said, as far as I'm concerned, Greg Lynn is responsible for my daughter's death by mental torture. I know she was living in absolute fear of Greg. Her actions were a combination of the fear and terror she lived under. He has a warped mind. He has done things in the past like killing animals and neighbours' pets and refused to feed the children.
Do you think Lisa's death was investigated properly at the time?
I think the bare minimum was done.
Does that disappoint you?
Yeah, it does, yeah. Her death deserved to be taken a bit more seriously, potentially, by the authorities than it was.
The investigation is ongoing, and the Victorian coroner could be asked to reopen the case into Lisa Lynn's death. But first, Greg Lynn will be sentenced in the Supreme Court, where he's facing life in jail. It's all but certain Greg Lynn will appeal.
Looking more stressed and weathered than he ever did on trial, Greg Lynn returns to court with a bombshell. His legal team announcing an extraordinary plan to quash his murder conviction.
I'm not going to sit, and my daughters aren't going to sit back and let him go free. Or Carol's family. Sorry. I think it's starting to get to me that we're not over it.
For the heartbroken families of Russell Hill and Carol Clay, there are still many questions yet to be answered, because no one knows what happened in the high country except for Greg Lynn.
That's the truth, and that's the best I can give you. It's not going to be much relief for the families.
How do you feel about Greg Lynn?
I'm just really angry that he went camping, that he is the person he is, and he happened to be right there with my dad and Carol, and this is what happened.
You wish their paths had never crossed?
Yeah, I really do. I think it was just really bad luck for Dad and Carol that they were there at the time. But it wouldn't have happened if he wasn't such an awful person.
Well, I hope he suffers for the rest of his life, really. Yeah, I hope he has a lovely time in jail.